The Indianapolis 500 is the largest single-day sporting event in the world. Every year on the Sunday before Memorial Day, more than 300,000 people descend upon Indianapolis, Indiana for their greatest spectacle in racing. 33 cars traveling at speeds in excess of 230 miles an hour, and whoever completes 500 miles first is the winner. But it might surprise you to learn that the Indy 500 doesn't actually take place in Indianapolis. The Indy Motor Speedway is so gigantic that it has its own zip code. The 2.5-mile Cathedral of Speed and its surrounding residential and commercial areas are part of what is officially recognized as Speedway, Indiana, zip code 46224. The absolute scale of this place is hard for the human mind to comprehend. It's so big that you could fit some of the biggest stadiums in America inside of it and still have room to place the entirety of the Vatican City in there too, just for good measure. And to match this massive scale, the Indy 500 isn't just a one-day event. For an entire month, there is constant, never-ending racing and practicing at the facility. There's the Indy Grand Prix where they race on the infield road course, then there are the opening testing sessions, qualifying runs, pole day, bump day, the final practice session, carb day, and then finally the 500 itself. Hell, they even built another quarter-mile dirt track on the inside of the speedway for more racing because, you know what, screw it, why not? All of these events comprise what the IndyCar faithful lovingly call the month of May. But if you're not from the Indy area, you may be surprised to find out that the racing going on within the confines of IMS is only the tip of the iceberg. Because during May, Indianapolis straight up turns into motorsports mecca. There are tons of racetracks all around Indy of all kinds, and every type of motorsport imaginable is holding some sort of event during May. So let's head up to the Hoosier State and check them all out. First off, let's visit the very first track you'll find if you're driving up from the south like me. Right off of I-74 is the Marion County Fairgrounds and Indianapolis' newest racetrack, Circle City Raceway. Built in late 2020 by a partnership between the fairgrounds and local businessman Kevin Garrigus, this quarter-mile dirt track immediately became a hit with race fans everywhere and got the USAC wingless sprint cars on board right off the bat. Being right next to I-74, it's easy to get to, and if you're in town for the 500, Circle City puts on events in the middle of the week right before the main event, racing on Wednesday and Thursday nights. The fact that this track exists is a minor miracle in and of itself. There had been a track on the fairgrounds property back in the 2000s, but by the late 2010s it had been leveled. Plus, in 2020, when the track was first proposed, we were in the height of the pandemic. The initial plans were laid out and agreed upon in July, and construction didn't start until October. So the grading team, Petrie Excavating, had to carve out a top-of-the-line dirt track in the middle of winter, battling the frozen clay and snows all throughout. And the track just barely got everything in place for their very first show in May of 2021, right before the 500. Since then, it's been smooth sailing ever since, save for one small development, a literal housing development next door. A subdivision nearby has expanded and gotten closer to the track, and wouldn't you know it, the people are now complaining about the noise. I think I-74 being so close by and creating noise around the clock 24/7 would be a bigger issue, but then again, if I didn't like noise, I wouldn't buy a house next to a racetrack. However, I have sources in the area that are telling me that the county council meetings are going in the track's favor. Apparently, people with racing t-shirts outnumber the Karens about 3-1, so I think we're in the clear for the time being. Even so, the track seems to be in good hands with Kevin Garrigus. He has a proven track record when it comes to operating racetracks because before Circle City, he had revitalized another historic track, the Indianapolis Speedrome. Built in September of 1941, just months before America's involvement in World War II, the Speedrome managed to survive the ensuing 4 years of racing being outlawed by the US government to save resources for the war effort. In 1946, it and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway overcame dilapidation and near destruction after they were more or less abandoned for nearly half a decade. But then they were renovated and bounced back in a big way, and legend has it that the completely flat Speedrome is the birthplace of figure 8 racing. After World War II, pre-war cars were cheap as dirt, and promoters realized that crashing these cars on purpose was bringing in more people than the quote-unquote real racing at the track. So with a little bit of paint marking and intersecting course layout, figure 8 racing came into existence. And to this day, the Speedrome plays host to the World Figure 8 Championships, the biggest and highest paying figure 8 event in the country. It is an insane 3-hour endurance race that pays $20,000 to win. But due to the nature of figure 8 racing itself, I think total damages to all of the cars involved might exceed 10 times that amount. Even still, the 1/5 of a mile Speedrome is host to some of the most toxic forms of short track racing you could ever hope to witness. They do it all: legitimate late model short track racing, drifting competitions, demolition derbies, figure 8 racing, you name it. Anything and everything takes place within the walls of the Speedrome, and I wouldn't have it any other way with this insane little track. But out on the west side of Indy is a one-stop shop for auto racing. The appropriately named Indianapolis Raceway Park is a paradise for gearheads of all stripes. You like drag racing? Okay, we got that covered. The NHRA comes around for the US Nationals, one of their crown jewel events, every year. Road course racing? IRP used to do that too, and even had USAC's stock car division race there for decades. Short track racing? Sure, what kind do you like? Silver Crown cars, midgets, sprint cars, stock cars, NASCAR trucks, and even IndyCar's minor league, the USF 2000 series. And trust me, there's nothing quite like watching what amounts to an F1 car rip the top of a short track. It is truly one of a kind, but for my money, nothing beats the Silver Crown cars. Although they resemble sprint cars, they have longer wheelbases and can go noticeably faster. And when they're at full song, they make a sound unlike anything you've ever heard. The Carb Night Classic, taking place the Friday before the 500, is where all these disciplines of short track racing come together for some of the fastest racing anywhere in the country. Some people say IndyCar forgot its roots long ago, but a little part of it still remains at IRP, and you owe it to yourself to visit the track and step back in time to see how things used to be. All the tracks I've talked about so far are within a 30-minute drive of city center Indianapolis. But if you can believe it, there used to be even more tracks in town. The historic 16th Street Speedway got its name because it was literally across the street from the Indy Motor Speedway. It was originally a paved short track built in 1946 right alongside the revitalization efforts for the big track, but in 1959 it was torn down and largely forgotten. Fast forward to 1997 and the old home of Indy's minor league baseball team, Busch Stadium, needs a new lease on life, and they get it thanks to Tony George, owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He wanted to bring back the old 16th Street Speedway, and just right down the road on the other side of the White River was good enough for him. Although the track opened to a lot of fanfare, interest died off and the aging Busch Stadium needed way more than just a new coat of paint. By 2000, George's lease was up, and no one swooped in to keep the track going. The stadium was left there until a few years ago when it was finally renovated and the minor league team moved back in. In 2012, IMS wanted to bring the track back, but nothing ever came of it. However, one track in the Indy area stands head and shoulders above all the rest, if you ask me. Just 35 minutes northeast of Indianapolis in the city of Anderson, and right at the corner of 29th Street and MLK Boulevard sits Anderson Speedway, not to be confused with Anderson Motor Speedway in South Carolina. This high-banked quarter-mile bull ring has become legendary in the Midwest short tracking scene. But when it was being built in 1948, it seemed like the track would never amount to much. Originally, a bowling alley was supposed to be built on the property, but the project manager and eventual race promoter, Joe Helpling, was convinced by some of his friends on the city council to build a racetrack instead. The overhead would be cheaper, you could bring in more people, and auto racing was all the rage in post-war America. Just one small issue. Joe had never been to an auto race of any type. He had no idea what he was getting into, so he attended a couple races at the now defunct Arms Camp Speedway in Alexandria and the 16th Street Speedway and loved what he saw. After that, he said to himself, yeah, I can do that, no problem, seems easy, and he just spitballed the idea of Anderson Speedway and went and did it. Dude was just shooting from the hip with one eye barely open and got a bullseye anyway. Gotta love the early days of motorsports, man. Midget cars and Indy roadsters were the big draws for the track's first year, but in 1949, Joe had an idea that would push the track into the halls of racing history. Right before the Indy 500, he wanted his own 500-lap race at the quarter mile. And just like at Indy, he wanted 33 cars to compete and start the race 3 wide, 11 rows deep. He selected the Roadster division to serve as the class for the first ever Little 500, as he called it, a group of cars that would eventually morph into asphalt sprint cars. Everyone told him that there was no way it could work. The wear and tear on the cars was too much and would cost the teams too much to come out there, and the winnings wouldn't pay it back. Joe then said screw it and upped the prize pool to entice guys to show up anyway, and it worked. To this day, every Saturday night before the Big 500, they hold the Little 500 in the bull ring. On the inaugural night, only 18 of the 13 starters finished, and when I went there this year, only 12 cars finished by my count, just 3 of which were on the lead lap. Even then, this has got to be the craziest race that I've ever seen in person. It was an absolute war of attrition with crazy wrecks, the eventual winner never being a certainty, and live pit stops under green. Yeah, they take the infield figure 8 track and convert it into a weird as hell pit road, and it somehow works. It's a 2-stop race for the cars, but since sprint cars don't have starters, when they come down to pit, they have to be push started, so a small fleet of push trucks and tow trucks stand ready to send the sprint cars back out into the fray as soon as they can. All the wrecked race cars are just discarded in the corners, and the race never stops unless there's a serious accident. It's as old school as it gets and as chaotic as you could hope, but the best man always seems to win. And some mad lads even race not just the Little 500, but the Carb Night Classic at IRP and the USAC race at Circle City back to back to back, Thursday through Saturday. The Redbud 400 in late summer is the stock car equivalent of the Little 500, and it's still ongoing too. Sanctioned by the ASA back in the day and ARCA today, if you want to watch the best of the best duke it out in a bull ring for a few hours, this is the place to do it. Former winners include Mark Martin, Dick Trickle, Alan Kawicki, Kyle Busch, Daniel Hemrick, and Eric Jones. And the late great Dick Trickle said the event was like watching fighter jets race inside of a gymnasium. You just gotta see it to believe it. All of these tracks have events on the week of the Indy 500, but they also have races all year round, and you'd be well served by going and seeing some of their big events or even their weekly shows whenever you get the chance. But the tracks I've been talking about are just the ones within a 30 or 40 minute drive of downtown Indianapolis. The entire state is filled to the brim with racetracks. You could throw a rock in any direction and hit 2 race promoters in the head. Paragon Speedway, Mount Lawn Speedway, Terre Haute Action Track, Gas City, Kokomo, Twin Cities, Lawrenceburg Speedway, Salem, Winchester, and I think that might be half of them. If there are 2 things Hoosiers do not want for in their state, it is quality racing and top-of-the-line racetracks. Get a map of Indiana and throw a dart at it and go there in person, and you'll probably find a race going on. There's no better place on earth to go watch some racing, and certainly not during the month of May. If you ever find yourself in this part of the country, you will be absolutely spoiled for choice if you're a race fan. Anyway, I'm Slapshoes, thanks for watching, and a big shout out to all my Hoosiers. You don't know how good you got it up there. Y'all take it easy.